The Sun and the Moon. For those of you Genshin players who follow the lore, those two names are already familiar. It's almost everywhere in the game. It has become a prominent theme among stories and also the foundation in the world of Teyvat. Every time those two names get mentioned or referenced, Genshin lore enthusiasts immediately gets hype, including me. The reason why it became popular has something to do with one particular book, and that book is none other than Before Sun and Moon. Because of that, today I want to share my complete analysis and thoughts about that book. So, if you are curious too, then follow this video till the end. It will be a long journey. Okay then, let's straight into the video. We begin with the section What. In these sections, we will focus on analyzing the book's content. So, what is book Before Sun and Moon? Before Sun and Moon is the second volume of Byakuya collection. It contains a pretty important story that is totally different from any sources we can find in the game currently. It is about the beginning of the creation. Uniquely enough, Before Sun and Moon, or I should say, all volume of Byakuya collection was written on the stone tablet. At least that's what I assume first. This little detail, on the surface, it seems not a big deal, but if we think more and try to fit it with our current understanding, then it might have a reason for that. And the reason is because stone tablet might have more resistance against immunity changing. You see, if my memory serves me correctly, immunity so far could only change information or history that's stored or recorded in people's memories and on paper. So might be, stone tablet is one of the many ways for humans to store information that is immune to the immunity. But at the same time, I feel like it is far-fetched. Byakuya collection could still write on the paper. It just so happens those paper are kept inside the stone. Because if we check again the location, there are a lot of paper scattered on the floor. Regardless whether it is on stone or paper, the more important thing right now is the content inside, right? Well, Before Sun and Moon consists of 17 subparts, and 3 of them are in the form of parables. Allow me to summarize and simplify the story. Eons ago, there was an old world ruled by 7 dragon sovereigns. Later on, the heavens, Primordial One, came, made for sense of itself, and defeat the dragons. Defeated dragons then run away and hide far beyond. Primordial One and its sage use eggshell to separate the universe and the macrocosm of the world. After that, they create a new world that humans can live in. From that time, humans made a covenant with the Primordial One, and so enter into a new age. In this new age, the heavens bring joy and prosperity to humanity. But the second throne of the heavens came and declared war on Primordial One. The war was so intense that it made humans and its land fall into the ground. Enkanomiya is one of them. In this underground, Enkanomians try their best to survive from terror of dragon hairs. They pray to Primordial One and its sage, but only Istaroth answers their prayer. Istaroth then gives Abrax enlightenment and orders him to build Helios to scare the dragon hairs. Because of that, Abrax later on is appointed as leader. Many years have already passed, and Enkanomians thought that the war might have ended and decided to find a path home, but they found none. So, they thought that the Primordial One would win and decided to live their lives again. In the 10th year, Abrax is long gone and all history of the past should have been recorded sufficiently. Okay, there's the simplified story. So what's next? Well, how about we start to talk and analyze the titles and contents of those parts? Among them, there are 3 titles that contains the same words. They are When the Dolph Held Branches, 40 years after the Held Branches, and 400 years after the Held Branches. These 3 titles and their contents tell us the whole story about the creation of the world. So far, I found at least 3 interpretations or connection to those titles and their contents. First, those whole creation stories might have taken reference from Genesis creation narrative, especially in Christianity and Judaism. Interestingly, the narratives in Genesis were not the only creation myth in ancient Israel, and the complete biblical evidence suggests two contrasting models. There are creation by word logos and creation by combat agon. Here's the thing. The second model, creation by combat or agon, suggests in which God creates the world by vanquishing the water deities, and these water deities are dragons. If we trace further, we can find that this second model has deep connection to Old Candid myth, where God cuts the sea god Yam in two and creates the ocean and skies. Furthermore, the idea that God vanquished a primordial sea deity and formed the seas and the sky from its remains are not something new. We can find it in several creation myths like Zeus killed Typhon, etc. etc. What makes Genshin version different is that Primordial One do not eliminate and use the remains of sovereign dragons to recreate the world. At least that's why I assume. Instead, Primordial One just vanquished them and let those who rebel and not kneel to them to go to the ocean, becoming Dark Sea territory. Second, beside Genesis creation narrative, it may also take reference to Genesis flood narrative, or Great Flood myth in general. In most cases of the myth, the Great Flood is usually sent by deity to destroy civilization in an act of divine retribution, as measure for the cleansing and in preparation for rebirth or recreation. If we put that narrative to Book Before Sun and Moon, then we will get the idea that seven dragon sovereigns was the heaven's creation at first, but somehow got divine retribution or Great Flood. In this context, Primordial One war on them in order to get cleansed and start recreation process. Third, the titles are also interesting to dissect. The word dove and branches most often used to represent peace, freedom, and love. But strangely enough, the content of the title cover does not represent peace. Primordial One battle against the dragons. You see, there is no peace there. So why did the author of this book choose that title? Well, it could be that it has another meaning. Beside peace, dove-held branches can also reference a dove in the story of Noah Ark, which relates to the Genesis flood narrative that I mentioned before. In that story, dove described as a herald that flood is over and land has been seen. So, in our context, Primordial One sees the old world and makes them into a new land. Another interpretation to these three titles said that the dove may represent the Holy Spirit, or the Divine, aka Primordial One, and branches as a seed of the tree, aka Immensul tree. In another word, when the dove held branches means when the Divine put the seed of the tree. 40 years after the held branches means 40 years after the seed get planted, and 400 years after the held branches means 400 years after that plants grow. Okay, we are done with those three titles. We now can jump to another one, and this time I just want to point out some important things. In the content of On Furnace or the Primordial One, it said there the Primordial One may have been furnace. It indicates that the author of the book was not really sure if Furnace is the real name for Primordial One or not. One other thing that is unique to that content is wording eggshell to separate the universe and the microcosm of the world. It may tell us the period in which the false sky was built, making Teyvat separate from the universe outside. The title of the year of the Ark's opening and the year after the Ark's opening makes me believe that Genesis flood narrative gives more inspiration to the creation of Teyvat. The year of Jubilee may refer to Jubilee in Christianity, which means a special year of remission of sins and universal pardon that occurs every 50 years. In this special occasion, slaves and prisoners would be freed, debts would be forgiven, and the mercies of the God would be particularly manifest. So, the year of Jubilee could mean the year where humans on Teyvat celebrate the mercy of Primordial One. But at the same time, it makes me wonder, if it is parallel to Jubilee in Christianity, then who are the slaves and prisoners in the Genshin lore context? Have you ever wondered why this volume has the name Before Sun and Moon? Well, it seems like it has two reasons. One refers to a story when Dainichi Mikoshi was not built yet. We need to remember that for Enkanomians, Dainichi Mikoshi has already become their source of light, like the sun and the moon. Based on that, before sun and moon means the time before Dainichi Mikoshi. Or 2 refers to the time where the world was created. In most world creation myths, before creating humans, God firstly creates sun and moon as source of light and season. So, before sun and moon means the time where God creates the world. Lastly, the 3 parables. They are the parable of the sun, the parable of the lethal lotus, and the parable of the tree. The parable of the sun most likely talks about the era where the nobles of Enkanomia get corrupted and blind by their authority. This is when the Sun Child era took place, and this era is cruel, so I don't want to talk about it any further. Next, the parable of the lethal lotus. Lethal lotus itself means forgettable lotus. On the first glance, it seems like there is no deep meaning behind it. But if you take a reference to Odyssey Journey Home to Ithaca, the part where they visit lethargic lotus eaters, then it would make sense. In that story, lotus eaters are a race of people living on land with lotus tree. These lotus tree produce lotus fruits, which can make whoever eats it basically lose their memories and only long to stay with their fellow lotus eaters. One other thing I want to add is that lotus can be used as a symbol of knowledge. Now, based on that, the lethal lotus in the parable might as well be considered the forbidden knowledge. Think about it. In that parable, they discover a tribe of people who ate lotuses and made them forget their troubles. Forgetting troubles, for me, is similar to losing memories. We know together that forbidden knowledge may cause people to lose their memories, and most of the time, forbidden knowledge has connection to temptation. Therefore, parable of the lethal lotus could possibly tell a story about a group of people try to gain forbidden knowledge but get the consequences. It makes me wonder if it could be tied to Hilichurls and Khaenri'ah or not, because it feels familiar. Okay, now how about the parable of the tree? Well, to be honest, I have no solid idea about this one yet. The content of this parable is so cryptic for me. Let me summarize what the content is. There was a king who wanted to repair his pavilion. Then, the king ordered his gardener to cut the tree with the most spiritual energy on it. The gardener falls in love with the tree spirit. But, since the king is incarnation of Primordial One, the gardener can't reject the order. Being conflicted, the gardener asks the king priest incarnation of Tokoyo Okami to find a solution. Later on, the king priest tells the gardener to cut the branches of the spirit tree. Half of that tree still goes to the king, while its branches plant in the ground. At first, the gardener was pessimistic that branches could not grow, because usually it will take 500 years. Unexpectedly, after the king priest said, "Your one thought shall echo through eternity," in an instant, the branches continuously grow into a new tree spirit. So, in that story, there are 4 important figures that connect each other: the king, king's gardener, king's priest, and the tree spirit. There, the king is the incarnation of Primordial One, and the king priest, in incarnation of Tokoyo Okami, is Tarwolf. Then we left with 2 names, gardener and the tree spirit. Who are they? Well, I believe some of you have already heard, read, or watched some theories about this parable. Some say that the gardener refers to Dainsleif, since his title is a bowkeeper, and the tree spirit is the avatar of Irminsul, like Ukadevata or Nahida. But there is a problem or question with that claim. As I mentioned earlier, that story tells us if all 4 figures connect each other, which implies that Dainsleif needs to have a connection to the incarnation of Primordial One and is Tarwolf, then also have a feeling towards the avatar of Irminsul. If that is the case, then does it mean the leader of Khaenri'ah, King Irmin, the incarnation of Primordial One, and someone in Khaenri'ah is incarnation of Tarwolf? Also, there is another avatar of Irminsul beside Ukadevata and Nahida? You see, with our current information, it is unlikely to be true. Some said that this whole parable might as well represent the story where Primordial One wants to heal the world, but instead disaster happened, so Iztaroth tried to solve that. Some also said that if this parable could potentially be a hidden story between Venti, Iztaroth, and Paimon, the tree branch itself. If you are still curious about this parable, I really recommend you to watch this theory video by The Little Onion That Could, link in the description. So yeah, there are plenty of interpretation regarding the parable of the tree. For now, I personally just leave the story as the way it is. Now, this second section is about where. So we will talk about location related to the book and its content. Starting with the basic. Where do we get the book? Well, firstly, we need to finish the World Quest collection of dragons and snakes. And then, along the way, we are ordered to collect 5 books and return it to its bookshelf. At the end of the quest, we will have access to keep it in our inventory. It is still a mystery whether it is canon to say that the traveler kept those books or not, because so far we only know that the traveler already read it, based on the event with Angel, but not sure if they keep it or not. So, regardless of all those things, the location where we get the book is indeed interesting. There are 2 parts. They are the mirror and the room inside of that mirror. This mirror is special because after we completed the quest, the mirror will become some kind of portal entrance. In my eyes, this portal entrance is quite familiar. At the moment, I can only find 6 things that look similar to that. The portal in Cape Odd Mondstadt, Spiral Abyss door entrance, portal on Jinwen Island in Azuma, portal on Vishuda Field Sumeru, portals in Enkanomiya, and portal on Golden Apple Archipelago. And if we see it from its function, then we can also include Domain door entrance and Abyss Lector portal as part of it. All of them have the same ability, as a door to another place. Some of them are special place, including the room in that mirror. That room is special because of 2 things. First, we need to do many trials to get access, and second, that room is similar to Domain. What I mean is, a place near Teyvat boundary. We know together that a place near Teyvat boundary somehow can hide from its law to a certain extent, of course. For example, Golden Apple Archipelago and Enkanomiya. Based on that, we can be sure at least if that mirror and room is a safe place to keep the book Before Sun and Moon, Byakuya-koku collection from outside. With all of that information, we can conclude that Enkanomiyans know how to build a portal. The question is, how do they know? Well, there are 3 possibilities. It could be that they learn from the Abyss, or a gift from Tokoyo Okami Iztaroth, or it is already common knowledge since Primordial One era. Which one do you think it is more plausible? Leave in the comment, yeah? Okay, our next question is about where the book content took place. It is pretty easy. Based on the info that we get from the book, there are only 2 places, Enkanomiya and non-Enkanomiya. Non-Enkanomiya is the region where Enkanomiya was part of, basically the region of one unified civilization. What makes this interesting is the fact that in the book, it said because of the war between Primordial One and the second who came, the Earth was rent asunder. Well, it sounds like continental drift to me. It indicates that a long time ago, there was one giant continent. This one giant continent was the land where one unified civilization at. Because of that great war, it made the giant continent drift and make the land today, like Inazuma, Liyue, and others. But at the same time, it also made one unified civilization split into another, and one of them is Enkanomiya. We have already seen many similar structure design across the land so far. It could be one thing, and that is because it was part of one unified civilization. You might argue the reason why there are similarities is because they take inspiration from one unified civilization. But there is a problem. That speculation seems to assume there are no survivors from one unified civilization after the war, which means it is the same thing as no humans survive after the war. Then the statement they take inspiration from one unified civilization becomes contradictory. What does the word they mean there, if no humans survive? Who are they? Yeah, Enkanomiya survive, but they are underground and cannot go to the surface. Then does it mean whoever wins the war will create humans again? Personally, what I believe right now, there were human survivors after the war, but as time goes by, generation to generation, they slowly change their original path. Basically, not all the land in that Great War sank into the ground. Some of them could still stand on the surface. At some point in the history, they look back to their glory era and their relics, then try to rebuild or mimic that structure. And that is how another civilization began after the war, I think. Now, I wonder where is Khaenri'ah in this context? Was Khaenri'ah the part of one unified civilization before? The land that split too far away from its mainland and built their own civilization from scratch again? Because we need to remember that people of Khaenri'ah is human, and human from what we know in this book was created by Primordial One. Then it makes sense to say that Khaenri'ah was also part of one unified civilization. Well then, we have already talked about location here, aka space. And you know what something related to space? Yep, it is time. Especially about time in the content of the book. Before Sun and Moon consists 3 periods of time. They are Pra-Human Era, Primordial One Era, and Enkanomiya Record Era. Pra-Human Era stretched from the Dragon period until Primordial One came and created the world and humans. Primordial One Era covers the era where humans and the heavens are in harmony. And for Enkanomiya Record Era, it is when the Great War began till they can build Dainichi Mikoshi and start their own civilization underground. At first, there was nothing wrong about that, until I realized something odd there. Do you notice that there is no single mention of Moon Sisters and Seelie in Before Sun and Moon? It doesn't even mention the Lunar Palace Calamity. Does it not odd to you? Such big events surely get noticed by Enkanomiya, right? But in reality, it only mentioned Primordial One, the heavens, and the second who came. So I wonder, what happens here? At the moment, I can just think of 2 possibilities. Number 1, the heavens in this book refers to Moon Sister and Seelies. But since they can be considered divine entities, Enkanomiyans do not dare to put their true title. That's why we cannot find any trace about them in this book. Or number 2, Lunar Palace Calamity happened after Enkanomiya sank to the ground. So it makes sense if there is no record about them in this book. If that is the case, it means Lunar Palace Calamity could be part of the Great War, with the second who came, or could happen after the Great War. Beside Moon Sisters and Seelies, it is also quite odd that Before Sun and Moon do not mention any human-like creatures. For example, fox like Yaemiko, cat like Diona, dog like Goro, Oni like Ito, etc. etc. Which brings us to another question. Who creates them? Does that mean they were humans but somehow evolved or mutated? We can still argue if those human-like creatures are humans, but really? Okay, one last thing before we jump to the next sections. While I was reading Byakuya collection, I found something interesting in volume 5 which mentioned that Tokoyo Okami is Taroth as mother of 14 billion years. For a second I what? What does it mean? Does it mean Istaroth is at least 14 billion years old? It is ridiculous if that is true though. Because if it is, then the battle between Primordial One with 7 Dragon Sovereigns, the birth of 4 Shades, and the creation of the world happened much longer than we expected. Or maybe, it has another meaning. These 14 billion years, for me, feel similar to the age of our universe, which is about 13.8 billion years. Also, the flow of time is believed to begin at that moment. And you know who in Genshin connects to time? Yeah, it is Istaroth. So, mother of 14 billion years could mean the beginning of time, or rather, the god of time, which is suitable title for Istaroth. Have you ever wondered who wrote the book Before Sun and Moon, especially Byakuya collection? Some of us might say it was Abrax or Istaroth, but based on what we already established in previous sections, it is not the case. Before Sun and Moon, Byakuya Koku collection contains several periods of time, where each of them lasts a very long time, which means a single human cannot reach that. So, it is most likely that Before Sun and Moon, Byakuya Koku collection is written by different group of people in different period of time. Interestingly, this group of people call themselves as Scribe of Tokoyo Okami. With this, it implies that the content of the book has a different point of view, depending on who and when that volume and part was written. Beside the person who wrote this book, the content also mentions several important figures that most of us are already familiar with. There are Primordial One, Four Shades, and Ishtaroth. It is worth mentioning that Primordial One has a pretty good description here. The book said that it had wings and a crown, and was birthed from an egg, androgynous in nature. But the question is, does that description really tell us the true nature of Primordial One? Because, like we have already established before, the author of this book is a group of people, still human. And humans, most of the time, really like to exaggerate the description about something. So it could be that wings and crown, birthed from an egg, are not the actual thing. Instead, it is just a metaphor for something else similar to that. Now, we are in the last section of the video. There are so many things we have discussed, but there is one last question remains to think about. If the content of the book is forbidden and can make Celestia anger, then why does this book collection, especially Before Sun and Moon, exist in the first place? What is the purpose? In my opinion, it could be three things. Number one, the writers of the book do not know if the content is forbidden. Number two, it is deliberately made so the future generation or someone who is chosen can be a witness of this valuable information, someone like the traveler. And number three, there is just a record, not really has any particular reason. Congratulations, you are watching this video till the end. I wanna say thank you so much for all your support. If you're interested in another analysis video, you might as well want to watch this video here.